Hello. So I'm finally back with the final review of this book. I decided not to read the rest of the stories because, or I already read the stories, but I decided not to review the rest of the stories because I have quickly realized this book is really messed up. I feel like it's not even, oh, it's problematic. Like, I feel like it's beyond problematic. It's genuinely like, it's just not readable to a certain extent for me personally. Like, it's a lot going on. The funny thing is, I feel like I am technically the target audience. Like, I think I'm supposed to be like, oh, I'm like a butch lesbian of color. Like, oh, like another butch lesbian of color wrote this book. Great. Like, I tried really hard to like it, or like at the very least, tried really hard to understand where the characters were coming from and kind of why their actions were the way they were, why they thought the way they thought, all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, I really am having issues kind of with like just I think I have issues with empathizing with the characters at all. Um, I know a lot of butch lesbians in the modern day who are very much like this, very much like the characters in the book, where they're super kind of concerned with looking, being, acting, the most like, almost like masculine, intense bravado, whatever. And because it's not something that seems very natural, it seems something that's very put on, if that makes sense. Like, and as a result, a lot of asshole behavior occurs. Like, I don't, it's hard to like put into words because it's also like on top of that, I'm trying to be very careful with the way I talk about it because I want to be understanding of the fact that like it's very much a period piece. It's very much a product of its time, but at the same time, that shouldn't be an excuse for, oh yeah, these characters are all actually god awful. All their actions don't make any sense. And on top of all of that, like, it's not enjoyable for me to sit here and read about somebody's internalized racism, to be honest. Like, and somebody's internalized homophobia and somebody's internalized self hatred for being a masculine lesbian. That's not what I want to read in my free time. Like, I gotta be honest, like, I've had too many experiences meeting people in person who are like this and just seeing it, and it just, like, makes me not only sad, but also just like, dude, why are you like this? Like, I objectively understand why you're like this on multiple levels, but at the same time, it's like, you need to dial it back by like 100. Like, I can't, it's something that I don't actively want to read for enjoyment, if that makes sense. So, the very long story short of this book is, or not the book, the specific story that I read, that I did make a 20-minute video about, mind you. I made the full review of the one story, and I felt like I just kept saying the same things over and over again, which was like, nobody in this story is right. And it's not that every story has to have likable characters, because they don't. Like, I really do enjoy stories where you're like seeing from the perspective of somebody who's very not likable and very like, maybe even morally wrong, and you're like, oh, like, you're not even convincing me of, oh, you're right. It's just interesting to see the unreliable narrator kind of explain their whole situation and then be like, and that's how it was, reader. And but like, for a fact, it's like that was not how it was, and like everything's really messed up. For example, the book Lolita, like, it blows my mind that people think that book is supposed to be like a romance novel, and I'm like, no. I'm pretty sure the author, like, I think it's Nabokov, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but Nabokov, the author, was like, yeah, no, this is a story about like a deranged like pedophile, literally, who is targeting this little girl and literally like killed her mom and like did all this crazy stuff. Like, so I think the book is interesting. I've seen movie versions of the book, and they're really well done. They're really not like, ooh, a sexy little girl. They're like, this girl is very much a child, and you can see that she's a child, and you can see like the diabolical things this grown man is doing in order to like literally groom this child. Like, so stuff like that is very interesting to me. Stuff like this where it's very almost like aggressively not self-aware. It's very like it's told as if you're supposed to side with the narrator, if that makes sense. You're supposed to be like, oh, this person's really good and has righteous anger and does all this stuff. And it's like, to me, this is very much like edgy butch, like, shenanigans. Like, I've seen too much of it. I've seen too many comics. I've seen too many illustrations. I've seen too many weird little poems on Instagram and all over the internet, to the point that I don't even go, like, I post in the Butch tag because that's where my art goes, because I draw butch lesbians or whatever. But like, I know I was about to say I never / I don't at the same time. That really came out weird. I really never go into the Butch tag anymore. And I'm going to be honest, on top of that, I really don't consume Butch art because all of it is very much not something that I can relate to or even enjoy looking at, because for the most part the quality is not very up there, because a lot of it that I've seen is more about the fact that, oh, I made Butch art and it exists. It's like, that's great, but like, the quality of the work being produced does not do justice to the subject, if that makes sense. Anyway, all this to say, the story that broke me in this book was the one where they're all in jail, and like, at first I was like, okay, it's just about the messed up system of like, okay, the American prison system in the 70s, and like all this stuff is happening, and like it makes sense that a lot of violence is occurring. But no, the character actively like just takes part in the whole system in a very specific way. You know, it doesn't matter, like, I don't get monetized by YouTube. I will never get monetized by YouTube because of the subject matter that I talk about. So, to not mince words, this character essentially has been like sexually assaulted in prison, but then also engages in sexually assaulting new inmates in prison, and does all this like just terrible things to other women. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my god, like, what is this book? And there's a lot of internalized racism in the way of like, there's another Asian character, you know, the main character naturally is Filipina. And the other character who is one of the main focuses in the book is this other like woman who's Chinese. And it's about the whole thing of like this like Filipino woman rejecting the Chinese woman initially, and then eventually they realize they're like, oh, we're the same person, like, oh, we're like the same type of people. And then like, not even as people, but just like racially, it's like weird. And then they end up like getting together, and I don't know about all of that. It was just very bad in my opinion, because it seemed like just an excuse for the author to say a lot of Asian slurs against this other Asian person, and then for the main character to be like, no, that's really wrong, like, we shouldn't be saying those things. But at the same time kind of being like, it's cool though, because I'm friends with the people who are saying the racist slurs. And it was like a whole like, what is the moral, like, what is going on, like, what are the themes, like, what is occurring? And like, the answer is, I could not tell you. It's literally, I feel like one of those stories where it's like a bunch of messed up stuff happens, and then it ends, and that's life. And it's like, I understand, I get it, there can be merit to that sometimes, because life is chaotic and nonsensical, and then it's done, like, I get it. But at the same time, like, why did we have to sit there and write this like multi-page story with like all of these gross slurs that I personally was uncomfortable? I tried to even talk about it in the other video that I made, and I was so uncomfortable, I felt like I was talking around the entire story, because it's just a lot of those slurs I got called when I was in like elementary school and middle school. So it was things that I was like, I don't even want to say this. And I find this with a lot of like vintage lesbian books, like all of them are just very have this very specific feel to them, and use very specific language, which I understand. Once again, it's the whole product of the time thing, but like, even as the main character is saying these things, she's also like, I acknowledge the fact that this is probably wrong, I probably shouldn't be saying it or doing it, and like, you know, like, none of this is good, like, none of this is good essentially, but still continues to do it and say it, and it's like really bizarre. And the next story that I hypothetically could review in this book, which I don't even, like, this is part of the reason I'm stopping, is the story is essentially about this butch lesbian character who's a child, like literally a kid, and it's just like, oh yeah, like, I've always been more masculine, like, I've always been like a tomboy, but like more than just a tomboy, like a little like tomboyish little girl. It's like, I knew that like I was like just like a masculine child, I guess, which I get. So there's that. But then it's about, I hate this so much. So this kid essentially goes around and is like, I'm going to go like sexually experiment with all these other kids. And it's just like, oh no, where is this going? And then eventually does the honestly, like, sexual assault that she's been doing to other kids, to this one kid who told, like, her parents what happened, and then it turns into a whole, like, the kid gets sent to, like, a mental hospital and gets, like, medically tortured, essentially. It's really intense. It's an intense story, and I personally cannot read. Well, I guess it depends on how the author's, like, kind of angling it, but that specifically, I can't read that type of stuff because I've had, like, stuff like that happen to me as a kid. Not like me doing it to other people doing it to me, because actually it was like, oh, you're the weird kid, so, like, if we do anything to you, like, you could tell an adult and nobody would believe you because, like, you're already, like, you know, the weird little kid who, like, makes up stories, like, not literally about real people. It's like I used to like writing stories and, like, you know, drawing comics essentially when I was a kid. But it was like, oh, you're like the weird person with, like, the imagination that's always, like, you know, running wild. Like, maybe you made this up. So, like, I can't read that. Like, it would really upset me. So, all this to say, I don't really know what I'm going to do on my channel, realistically. Because it's like, I really thought about doing my usual, like, topical videos. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I know that leads to harassment because people don't know how to have critical thought on the internet. Like, literally, like, I don't know how else to put that. It's just like, I don't feel like getting harassed like that again, ever. Like, I'm at the point in life where I'm almost like, yeah, do I post on Instagram now? Sure I do. Like, I post on Instagram, great. But at the same time, it's like, I'm not trying to get grilled alive ever again. I'm not trying to have, like, weird, intense conversations that I'd only really have with people I'm friends with random strangers on the internet, if that makes sense. Like, if I'm going to text somebody about, for example, some of the video ideas I've been having are like, oh, like, the way that activist language and, like, how do I put it, language essentially in, like, leftist spaces all has its roots in, like, AAVE, and people bring it up for 5 seconds, but they don't really talk about it, and it really bothers me, because it's like, guys, like, how are we, like, talking about our own oppression, very specifically as, like, non-black people of color, and or, like, you know, white people or whatever who are, like, LGBT, like, how are you guys, and, you know, me, a non-black person of color, how, like, are we talking about our own oppression while essentially oppressing another group of people, also known as Black Americans, who foundationally created a lot of the foundation of, like, modern day activism. So that's a video I thought about doing. I also thought about, I don't know, talking more about, like, I know this video would get me, like, murdered, but my own personal experience, I want to talk more about how in the past year or so, maybe even 2 years, there's been a weird phenomena with me personally where, like, people have started really thinking I'm a cis man or, like, a cis boy, whatever way you want to put it. And, like, the way that my perception of, not myself, because I still think I'm, like, the same old little, like, person, but, like, how or I guess others' perception of me has, like, made me react differently, or, like, had me doing certain things or saying certain things. Nothing super disingenuous, but it's like, I've started talking in a lower register when I, like, talk to people in public and they start, like, sirring me or, like, broing me for safety reasons. So I wanted to kind of talk about that, the whole, like, socially transitioning thing, because, like, it's kind of happened out of nowhere. I feel like I haven't really been doing anything different, but a lot of people seem to think that, like, I magically have, like, become, like, a man overnight, and, like, I don't know, that's a whole thing. And also in LGBT spaces, whatever you want to call it, like, more and more people have been thinking that I'm also, like, either a trans guy or, like, trans mask, or straight up, like, they think I'm, like, I have had top surgery or, like, whatever, and they think that I'm on, like, T or whatever, and I'm like, no, like, no, nuh-uh, like, that's personally not for me. And I made a video about that before, but, like, that's something that I was thinking of unprivating, because I think it's, like, kind of an important topic that nobody really talks about in a productive way. Not that I'm like, I'm the one, like, I'm going to talk about it, it's going to make so much more sense than everybody else. Like, no, it's not even that. I guess I just haven't seen it from the perspective of, like, this is why I don't do it. It's not shitting on people who do take hormones. Like, good for them. Like, I'm happy for them. But also, I know it's not for me. So that's, like, a whole thing. I don't know, I'll talk about like being on the internet and being well known but not being actually famous, so that when people literally start attacking you, there's nobody to back you up, and then everyone just sits there and watches, even people who are supporters, because they're like, well, I don't want to get attacked. And I'm like, I understand that, but the thing is, like, none of this is helpful, essentially. So I would like to make all those videos, but at the same time, I know making all those videos, especially the whole everybody thinks I'm a man now for some reason one, is going to make everybody mad. And I can feel in the comments people immediately being like, oh, well, that's funny that people think you're a man, because I don't think you're a man. You're not a man at all. You're a little girl, actually. Haha. Like, I can tell, like, clocks, like, haha, the transvestigation of Lou Johnston. I'm just going to be sitting there like, I'm not saying that I think I'm a man or that I am a man. I'm saying that other people randomly think I'm a man, and it's tripping me out. But once again, I feel like that's a whole conversation I can't really have online, because people will really get mad and be like, oh, you think you pass? You don't pass it? Oh, you think passing is a real thing? That's actually an offensive term. It's like, no, it's not. It's literally like, you can call it whatever you would like, but it's essentially just like it shouldn't be an offensive term, in my opinion, because it literally is just speaking about the specific phenomena of like the perception of others, you know, or your own perception of yourself versus the perception of others and your gender identity. That's how I see it. I'm not like, oh, well, you're better or worse if you don't. Like, no, like, it's literally not about that, but whatever. I know everyone likes to fight because we're all swirling in a pool of depression and existential dread. So it's easier to fight a random person on the internet than actually examine yourself as a person, but that's never going to happen with so many people. Makes me sad, but at the same time, whatever, not my problem, I guess, until it becomes my problem when you type in the little comments and it turns into a whole thing, whatever. I don't know, just a fun heads up. A lot of people have discovered this. If I feel that a comment is unproductive in the first few sentences and it's a giant comment that's like 3 or 4 paragraphs long, I delete the comment and I don't read it. I'm sorry. I know everyone wants to leave their giant like hot take discourse comment, but the thing is, if I think it's genuinely unhelpful and I didn't want to read it, so I feel that other people who watch these videos don't want to read it, I'm not posting that shit. Like, I'm sorry, like, I'm not doing it. My advice is make your own channel. I really highly recommend make your own channel. You'll get bullied for sure. I can confirm that one for you, but make your own channel, see how you feel. And then you can vet all the comments that you want in your comment section. But until then, this is my channel, unfortunately. And I'm allowed to delete your comments or not read them. I'm also allowed to block you from ever posting on my channel again. So keep that one in mind. Okay, I'm going to leave because I have been saying a lot of random things for the past 20 minutes. Talk to you soon, hypothetically. Bye.